Okay, I think we're pretty well good to go. As I make it, it's spot on. So if we're all good to go, I'll go live on Facebook and we'll jump into the room. Everyone good?
Yeah, quick question. Do you want us to go on mute when we're not speaking?
I think with a small group like this, it's fine.
It's fine.
If you
Okay.
find that there's feedback happening, then just mute yourself. But with this group, I generally find it's fine. Thanks, Kristy.
Great.
How many are we expecting again tonight, Chris?
We had, I said, about 107 registered. I think we'll end up with around 50 on. We generally have a 50% drop off in terms of people that attend. So something round about there, I'm thinking, Peter. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Let's go for it. We'll go live and we'll do the broadcast. Hello, good evening, everyone. It's just on the hour. People starting to come in. I'd love you just we'll give a couple of minutes for everyone to come in, but please type your name and say hello in the chat box as you come in. Dave Budge, great to see you again. There's Emma Foster, Rachel Baton. Thank you, Rachel, from Biarritz. Hope it's lovely weather for you there. Robin Rose, Sarah McCrum. Hey, Sarah. Great to see you. Stephen South. Anyone else just like to chat in the box? Hello, Tom Carey joining us from London. Wonderful to see you. Michelle During. Folks, we'll just give another couple of minutes before we do some formal introductions. Letting people in. Hello, Alex Raja coming in from Sydney. Rich Stacey Chapman. Hi, Rich from Loughborough, Iowa. You're up early, Michelle. Great to have you there so early. Hello, Paul, joining us from Bangkok. Nice to see you. Brad Gander from Vivid Sydney. Hey, Brad. Okay, let's just give it another minute or so, and we'll get underway with the intros. What are we up to? 6:02. Yeah. Well, why don't we get underway? Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Robb. For those of you that don't know me, wonderful to be back. We've had a little bit of a pause on these to catch my breath a little bit in between the various things that have been happening, but it really is wonderful to be back and super excited about today's topic and the wonderful panel that we have. So tonight, we're going to be speaking tonight, in the morning, in the evening, in the day, wherever you are across the world, a neuroscience perspective on participant behavior change in the new normal. And I have absolutely no doubt that there's going to be a great conversation and some fascinating insights. And just before I announce our panel, what I'm going to do, as I always do, is just pop a poll in there to understand who our audience is. So if you wouldn't mind filling that in while I introduce our panelists. Delighted to be joined all the way from Brisbane, Anna Waters, Chief Operating Officer at NeuroPower Group from Brizzy. Hi, Anna. And
hi, everyone.
Peter Burow, Founding Partner at NeuroPower Group, also from Brisbane. Hey, Peter. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to see you all.
Great to see you. And Kristy Castleton, normally joining us out of Singapore, the founder of REBEL&SOUL, but today in the Welsh countryside with herself in a beautiful home and probably a couple of sheep outside in the green grass. Great to see you, Kristy.
You too. Hello from the valleys.
Wonderful. So just a quick bit of housekeeping, as always. If you wouldn't mind, stay on mute. I've got both the question and the chat box up, so please pop in your questions in those as we go through. There'll be a couple of questions we might be asking of you as we go through it. And I'm just going to pop the results of the poll in here as expected, mostly from the mass participation industry, but I'll share those for everyone to see. We are live on YouTube, so if there's any of your colleagues, friends that have missed it who would like to watch it, please make them aware of it. Live on Facebook. We are recording and we will be posting the recording on YouTube within the next 48 hours. And just a couple of other quick initiatives. The MPW Online Summit, which I've been speaking about for a while, is now confirmed for the 14th of October. We'll be releasing details of that and registration opening on the 14th of September, but mark your diaries. We'll be running it in 2 sessions. We'll do a morning Singapore time to capture American market and so on, and then an afternoon Singapore time to capture other markets. The Aid Station, after a bit of a pause, we're back. Had a wonderful interview yesterday with Janet, who heads up Xterra out of Hawaii, and tomorrow have a wonderful interview out of Taiwan. So look out for those. The webinars now, as a result of feedback from participants and people that were joining in, are now going to be fortnightly, and the next one will be on the 17th of September. The Power of Purpose-Driven Events in the New Normal. We'll be joined by Keith Williams, the COO and CMO of Fundraising, Brian Lively, the founder of ACL Square Consulting out of the US, and Nicole Jury, the Director of Development at Boston Athletic Association, with the Boston Marathon having a massive program around purpose-driven events and raising funds and so on. As always, please send your questions to me if there's anything that I can help with. If you're missing the information, excuse me, just grab a quick sip of water. If there's anything I can help you with, chris@chrisrob.asia, and follow me on LinkedIn or Facebook to get the announcements of things that are happening. Today we're going to focus on 3 main key areas. We're going to start off with Anna sharing a framework for us, the EAST framework. Kristy is going to share with us another framework, the Involve framework, which REBEL&SOUL work with. And one of the key areas we're going to focus on in amongst all that is going to be the opportunity around key co-creation here. I think there's quite this whole sense of compliance. We'll tell people what to do. We'll expect them to, of just kind of like coming along and following what they're told to do. And we're going to get some really great neuroscience perspectives from the team on that, and particularly Peter around that, and lots of other things. The opportunity to redefine events, the fact that we have a blank piece of paper here. What does it mean for different cultures, how people respond in different cities, and the opportunity to learn some kind of neuroscience perspectives behind that. So why don't we, and then at the end of that, we're going to come back, we'll summarize, we'll take questions on the way through and at the end, and obviously welcome those all the way through. We've allocated an hour. We've now got 53 minutes, so why don't we jump straight into it and ask Anna to kick off with sharing some of the details of the EAST framework for us, please.
Absolutely. And thank you all. It's great to be here with you tonight, and looking forward to talking about practically what the insights from neuroscience mean for when we're looking at organizing events and having mass participation sporting events. But to kick it off, we know that these events have a massive impact on people's physical, emotional, and social well-being. And we know that we've had, thousands and thousands of events cancelled, almost sort of right at a time when we really need connection and physical health and all of these wonderful things that these events bring. And so to sort of support as you're looking at hosting events and supporting events or being part of the industry, really understanding how we're going to be creating these events in a COVID world is part of the big conversation tonight that we're all looking forward to. And to help us understand how we nudge people's behavior towards sort of safe and really healthy actions, we need to sort of pop the bonnet a bit and go underneath and look at how our brains actually work, to understand what that means for how we act and how we interact. From all different decisions that we make to do with an event, to do with registering, and then in the preparation, and then during the actual events, where people are making dozens of these micro decisions, and every decision that people make can help or hinder the safety and the effectiveness of the event. So really the discussion today is really about looking at what's happening in our brains so that we can make the most of these events and shape them to be the kinds of events that we're wanting. So keen to kick off with some social cognitive neuroscience to introduce us to that so that we can have a look at what the science says. And then the EAST framework is then what that means in practice. But before we kick off, Kristy or Peter, is there anything else that you'd add at the outset about our conversation tonight or today, wherever you are in the world?
You're muted.
Okay, I'll go first. So thanks for that, Anna. I think you're right. I think what's probably the most exciting piece right now is actually, despite the situation that the whole industry faces, we're actually in a huge position of opportunity, an opportunity to rewrite the future of events and the marketing that goes around them. You know, we are, as a nation, craving contact. We're craving experience and novelty, and how we can write that is certainly a fascinating topic I'm excited about exploring today. And I think that, you know, why look at the brain for that? Well, because we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. We can't actually predict what the future is going to be, but what we do know, and certainly there's some brilliant people on this panel that know a lot more about it as well. So we do know about the brain and have some fascinating insight into how it operates. So what we can predict is people's behavior to some extent, and that's what I think these frameworks that we're going to introduce today will hopefully give you a little bit of a head start in how you can do that then for your events and your planning.
Thanks, Kristy. Peter?
I think the thing that is having the biggest impact on me is in every different sector, including this sector. We have, for the first time ever in recorded history, a complete reset. So this isn't just mass participation. This isn't just government. This isn't just a financial services institution or a sector. So in the Western world, particularly in English colonies, we have royal commissions. Now, sometimes you can have a royal commission. This is like a Senate inquiry into a particular sector, and that sector goes through rapid change. But no other sector does, just that sector. Or you can have a reset in terms of a funding model. Let's say the share market crashes. The share market may crash, but agriculture is always strong. Or perhaps you have an event, a terrible cyclone or a tornado or a flood, and Louisiana or Brisbane, or we have a meltdown in a particular town, and it impacts that little area. Now, this is very different because for the first time ever, the entire world is in shutdown and is at reset point. So the reason this is relevant is that this is like a contemporary version of the Ice Age. When we come through the other side, the species, the events, the groups, the cities, the towns, the communities, the companies, the small businesses, the family businesses that come through the other side will define the new normal. And so the opportunity here isn't about trying to replace what we had, but instead to say, how will we be one of the new survivors in a brand new world? And right at the moment, we've got a lot of government stimulus right across the world, but that will come to a close, that will stop. And so there will be an edge. And we're going to see change, not just in financial services, but also in manufacturing and entertainment and in mass participation and in defining what sports looks like. So the invitation here in my mind is that we have the courage to reset, to reinvent, to redefine what this is. And exactly as you said, Kristy, there are millions of people the world over now just wanting to get out there and do something. But the rules of the game have changed. And what success looks like in this new post-COVID, or even, we've been talking about post-COVID, but what happens if it's coexisting with COVID, in this coexisting with COVID future? Because if you actually look at the trends, we're getting these kinds of viruses every 3 years. So yes, we're through COVID-19, but we may have another one in another 3 or 4 years. So it doesn't work for us to just say, you know what, thank goodness it's all over. The nightmare has passed. In 18 months' time, we have a vaccine and it's all going to go back to how it is. Well, people are forming new habits, and we're very involved in multiple sectors and looking at new habits in the way we work and the way we play and the way we express ourselves, the way we find life partners, the way we spend money, what security looks like, what democracy actually means, this idea of a balance between individual security and to what degree are we willing to put our freedom to one side for society health? You know, these are eternal questions that are being brought up once again. And you're right at the very, very center of it in mass participation, right in the center of it, because this is where a sense of love, of community, of family, of belonging, of personal health and vitality, and the meaning of life all come together. And yet the mistake could be to think that what we're doing is encouraging a whole bunch of people to get together and go for a bit of a run. It's a lot more than that. And here's an opportunity for cities and environments and organizations who are starting to shape up what new participation, mass participation looks like, to be able to redefine the new normal. So an exciting time, not just in this sector, but exciting in this sector because it's exciting right across the board. And you could argue that nothing is really changing. We're just taking things that people thought would take 20 years forward. So things that we thought were going to be happening in 20 years from now are going to happen in 20 months from now. So where do we want mass participation to be in 20, 30 years' time? We're going to be looking at that in a couple of years. And not everybody will be able to do that, and so not everybody's events are going to survive.
Some great insights and fantastic stage setting. Thank you, Peter. And going to pop a poll in there just in terms of understanding what people think those comfort levels are, assuming that we get that blank piece of paper and people can go out and have the opportunity to, as you said, show love, belonging, personal health, connection. So I'm going to pop that in the there to get an idea of the poll of what people feel of their participants. And I'm going to come back to you, if I may now, Anna, and get you to start to share some of the EAST framework with us. Thank you, all three of you, for those intros. Really valuable.
Nice. It's nice to set the scene and kick off the discussion. And as we heard from the intros, you know, and as we look around the world that we're in, there is a lot of uncertainty, and we're not really sure what's coming. We can anticipate and plan and prepare as much as we can, but we really don't know what's coming. But one of the things that we do know is a bit about how our brains work. And people seem enormously irrational, but are actually hugely predictable. And when we understand a bit more about our brains, it then helps us to understand what we're likely to see from people and from humans. And when we get humans together, there's a great framework that we like to use, and we use this in every aspect of work that we do, because at the core of it, it helps to understand how people work. And in our line of work, people are the common denominator. So in neuroscience language, we're talking about system X and system C, in behavioral economics. It's called System 1 and System 2. But they're different systems in the brain. And so System 1 sits in the midbrain. It's the limbic system. Now, this system is very fast. It's automatic and it's unconscious. Whereas System 2 sort of sits on top. It sits in our prefrontal cortex, and this is our executive functions. It's slower. It's more considered. It's quite conscious. We like to refer to these systems as the elephant and the rider, because the elephant is sort of fast, automatic, it's emotional, it's quick, and it's unconscious. And then every now and then the rider sort of sitting on top trying to navigate the elephant sort of says, oh, now just a moment, let's just pause and think there. This is the thinking processes, right? It's a bit like the child and the parents, or any analogy that sort of works for you. But the elephant and rider seems to help us conceptualize these two different systems of the brain. But we know that when we're under stress, our System 2, our rider up here behind our forehead, is actually less active. And we're under the control of a more automatic system, which is our elephant. It's sort of, the elephant brain just kind of likes to wander off and do its thing. And then, you know, those, the moments when you say something and you realize that you hadn't filtered it, like this is your rider brain sort of saying, oh, that was your outside voice. And so we constantly have this tussle in our heads. And part of the reason why this is so interesting and relevant is that these systems are how we make decisions, and then how we take actions based on the decisions that we've made. So I was just getting a little bit of feedback. But we have this tussle between these systems, which is quite interesting. We've actually seen it. We've seen it a few times, well, many times during the last few months. But there's been a few public officials. I'm not sure if you've seen the rounds on YouTube, but there was an executive director at the World Health Organization, and there was also a chief health officer in California who were asking people from a podium not to touch their face while they were touching their face. I think one of them even licked their finger to turn the page whilst asking people not to touch their face. The Dutch Prime Minister was asking people not to shake hands right at the Dutch Prime Minister was asking people not to shake hands right at the and then finished and then turned and shook hands with the person next to him. Like these are bright people. These are very well-intentioned people, but their elephant brains were running the show. They were, it was automatic, right? Like you shake your hand when you finish the speech, even though the whole speech was about not shaking hands. And so the point of this is, when we're talking about how we make decisions and take action based on it, we feel like we're talking to the rider brain and we're wanting the rider brain to engage. And so it's cognitive and it appeals to people's best side. And it's like, well, it's rational. Well, it just makes sense to do these things. But what we need to understand is that the elephant is responsible for 90% of our behavior. So our elephant brain is taking action, not our rider brain. And so we need to take that into consideration and just sort of respect and acknowledge the power of the elephant. And interestingly, like we do this adulting thing where we don't say the first thing that comes to our minds most of the time, which is very, very helpful for staying employed and staying in relationships. So we try and manage the elephant as much as possible in our day-to-day. But the thing is, when we get tired, when we're hungry, when we're stressed, it's a bit harder to wrangle it. And sometimes the elephant just sort of bucks the rider off and charges off. And so when it comes, even thinking about people running marathons, at the end of running a marathon, when they're absolutely exhausted, it's likely that you're going to see more habitual behavior. So it's things like that that's just going to be important to take into consideration. Now, what that what that means in practice is that there's a very simple framework developed by the Behavioural Insights team in the British government called EAST. And it's really helpful because as we look at this field of behavioural economics, where this EAST framework came from, it's about nudging the elephants, nudging behaviour towards something that you're wanting, people to move towards. It's a bit like peanuts. So you're trying to guide the elephant, right? So you got to know which peanuts and where to put them to guide the elephants towards a particular type of behaviour. So the EAST framework is all about how to lay the peanuts so that you can get people, heading in the right direction. So EAST is an acronym. The E stands for making it easy. We want to make it easy for people to do the right thing, the desired thing. So for example, I'm not sure what it's like in each of your respective areas and countries, but here in Brisbane, Australia, we have X's on the floor of every shop. And so it's like you don't need to mentally measure out the 1.5 meters. You just stand on the X. So this is making it easy for the elephants, right? You walk in, you stand on the X. They've done it for us. To make it easy, we need to reduce the hassle and we need to simplify the messaging. So whether it's from your initial marketing to registration through to safety instructions, it's really important to keep it short and simple. And we've seen a lot of this through COVID. It's wash hands, 1.5 meters distance, stay home, save lives, cover your mouth, get tested. Like it's 2 words. It's really, really simple. And that's to try and make it very, very easy for people to do the desired thing. So that's the easy of EAST. The A stands for attractive. And this is make it attractive, make it fun, make it enjoyable, attract people's attention, reward good behavior. And, honestly, most of us want to do the right thing, but a long list of rules is really not very fun. And so, if we're taking away either celebration or connection, even like through hugging, like what are we actually replacing it with? So we need to think about how we're making things attractive for people. It's not just a tedious list of compliance things. And I know Kristy's going to talk a lot more about this one very shortly. The third one is social. The S stands for social. As you're laying the peanuts and nudging people towards a particular behavior, you need to make it the done thing. So this is how athletes now engage in the event. It's like the new thing that's done. And you have an opportunity, as Peter said, to reset that. Getting well-known people in the industry involved in some of that can help as well. To make it social, using networks and relationships will be really important. Getting a guiding group of people together to sort of come up with some solutions and co-create it will be really impactful and powerful. And another way to help in this social section is to encourage people to make a commitment to others. So when they're signing up to an event, what commitment around safety and responsible behaviours are they making quite explicitly? That'll be a powerful way to help channel the elephants.
That's a really clever one. So everyone signs up and terms and conditions and everything. And so part of that, by signing up to do this event, I commit that I will be safe to other people. That's an interesting perspective. Yeah. Yeah.
And even like not like a long thing, like keeping it simple and keeping it, the way that and make it very specific, the way that I celebrate at the end of the event will be respectful and safe for other people. The way that I will actively support other people to engage in safe behaviors, like really simple, but really sort of community focused as well. Yeah. And the T stands for timely. And this is about prompting people when they're most likely to be really receptive and open to that sort of the information that you're wanting to communicate. For example, if you're looking at messaging around a water station, by the time people get to the water station, the elephants will be taking charge, right? Because they're thirsty and they're tired. So if they get to the water station and then you've got the signs, the elephant will be in there and the 1.5 meters might be out the window. But if you're framing it 50, 100 meters back, so it's in their brain, they can prepare for it. They're, you know, and then once they get there, more likely that once they arrive there. So timing's key in thinking through each of the bits. Sometimes it's important to have it right there then. Sometimes you need to frame it sort of beforehand. So that's the EAST framework. It's very, very simple, but designed to be simple so that anyone can sort of quite easily implement it in terms of an event that you're running, or just as you're thinking, a bit of a checklist to think through how you can better sort of nudge and guide elephants to make safe choices.
Lay a trail of peanuts for your runners to make sure they get to the finish line safely. I love it. Wonderful. Thank you, Anna. Let's throw over to maybe Peter before we go to Kristy, and I'm going to share the results of that previous poll. But Peter, you got any follow-up comments on that before we go to Kristy to start talking about her framework?
Just simply, I mean, the big idea here is we have New Year's resolutions all the time, and we decide we're going to eat less and exercise more, and we're going to spend more time with these people and less time with those people, but we don't do it. And so the big question really is, why, with the best intentions of the world don't we do what it is that we decide we're going to do? And the answer is because, exactly as Anna has talked about, inside us we have this tension. We've got this part of us, the rider, that says, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to go on a fun run. I'd like to be involved in this. I'd like to be fitter. I'd like to spend more time with friends. I'd like to drink less. I'd like to go to the gym more. These are all very rational, sensible, rider-based ideas. But the elephant likes to drink, and the elephant likes to eat sugar, and the elephant likes to sleep in and watch TV. And the elephant has not a lot of interest in pain. So the biggest issue here is that if you construct, and governments make this mistake often, and this is something in the Australian environment, unions don't make this error, but employers do. The employer appeals to the rider, the union appeals to the elephant. Governments, in trying to change eating patterns, they try and appeal to the rider, but the soft drink manufacturers and the sweets sector in the beverage and the fast-moving consumer goods, they all, good advertising is good because it changes behaviour, and it changes behaviour because it appeals to the elephant. So everything that Anna is saying, and that Kristy will take you through as well, is all about saying, just because it's sensible doesn't mean people will do it. And just because it looks a little bit odd doesn't mean it's ineffective. So if you're going to reset, it's no good coming up with a list of 6 rational reasons why people should participate, because everybody will agree and nobody will do it. And right across the world, you've seen politicians who make absolutely no sense, yet people vote for them because the politician has the ability to appeal to the elephant rather than the rider. Facebook appeals to the elephant, not to the rider. I mean, what do you learn from Facebook? However, we get drawn into Facebook or drawn into social media because it's exciting, it's different, and because on social media, every time you post something, not when you watch something, when you post something, you get dopamine, and dopamine rewards the elephant. So it's a very long way of saying the EAST model, and what Kristy's going to cover, is absolutely critical. It makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense to the cleverest advertisers and promoters in the world. And that's why Elon Musk does so well, because he not only appeals to the rational side, but appeals to the irrational side, or the elephant side of the brain. And I think you put that beautifully, Anna, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Kristy says.
Thank you, Peter. Over to you, Kristy. Let's have some insights into your involved framework that you've used on so many events.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I mean, following on from what Anna and Peter have been saying, you know, we built this framework to appeal predominantly to elephant, and I think that's the, you know, the crux of the model. You know, there's a little bit of rational, priming in there too, but you know, we recognize from all of the events and the marketing that we were putting out there that there was no, or very little, rational response into the way that, you know, people were behaving. And so we built and tested a model that when applied to the design of any marketing and event campaign, it effectively will trigger a higher attention. And without attention, you're not going to, you know, be able to implant those memories. So to trigger that attention, to hold it for as long as possible, to effectively fool your brain into thinking that this is a vital piece of information, that this is a life-saving experience that you need to bank, because we're not programmed to remember not non-life-saving information or non-life thriving information. And so effectively we needed a way around this, and that's what the model does. So, you know, and there's a lot of similarities to the East model, and I'll take you through it in very top line detail. The involve, each of the letters stand for a part of the process, and the first letter is I, and it's for intrigue. And without intrigue, you do not have the elephant's attention, because, you know, it's seen a lot before. It's, you know, an expectation, unfortunately, is our biggest filter. If we've seen something before, we already have a memory of it, and we've already worked out whether we want to probably pay any more attention, you know, or not. And so we try and create as much intrigue as possible. And this is especially in the run-up to a live event, for example. You know, we're effectively trying to spike a little bit of an adrenaline rush. You know, what is this? I haven't seen this before. You know, what could it be? Because, and that's needed now more than ever. You know, we have some people right now will have an aversion to a live event. You know, they're feeling really uncomfortable with the current situation. They're not sure if they want to, you know, interact with a lot of other people. The more that you can intrigue them, the more they're at least going to consider it, to make it something that they might do again. So that would be the first part of the recommendation. What that can look like, you know, some people that have been doing it brilliantly, companies like Secret Cinema, you know, they rarely tell you what film it's going to be until, you know, the last few weeks before they actually, you know, release the film. And so you get a lot of people guessing, and a lot of people interacting, connecting on social, saying, oh, what do you think it is? Is it this? Is it not? And that's brilliant. It helps build up that intrigue. And so you almost, you know, that the community is then doing the work for you, because they're all guessing. So I think as much as you can, you know, perhaps not release all the details of your event to start off with, or, you know, get people to think, what could this be like? Is it something that I might want to join? You're going to have a more powerful effect to get that elephant's attention. The next piece of the pie is the N stands for novelty. And again, you know, going back to that, you know, if we've seen it before, we're not necessarily going to pay it much attention. So we always try and create new, and it's never more important than now to create new. You know, we've got this opportunity to literally rewrite the future of events, and we're also, you know, we're in this position, you know, until now, until pre-COVID, we've all been in this incredibly privileged position of thriving, you know, or a lot of us have, especially those in the live events industry, with the experiences that we're able to put on or attend. You know, they're incredibly rich face-to-face experiences with community, etc. We've just been thrust back into survive mode, and that's changed everything up. If you can offer people a little bit of thrive again, a little bit of what they're missing, but wrapped up in a new, safe, you know, it's going to be okay to be around other people again. then I think there's a huge opportunity to take a real share of market, because it's what they're craving right now. So, but yes, novelty would be one, and that could be new. That could also be nostalgia. You know, something that we have a lot of memories of. You know, remind them of the time when. It can also be a really powerful way to go. The V stands for vivid, and that's not just about getting their attention with bright, shiny things, but this is where we really focus in on the power of visualization. And I think this could be huge for the live events industry, and especially mass participation going forward, because, you know, if you can use words like imagine, you know, imagine running across that finish line and the feelings it's going to evoke. It's as good as them being there and actually having that experience. You know, there's some brilliant studies out there that talk about the power of visualization and the tangible, the physical effect it can have. You know, there was a brilliant study by, I think it was the University of Ohio, don't quote me on this, the detail, but it was a study whereby they took a number of participants and asked them to exercise for, say, 10 minutes a day for 5-6 days a week over a period of a month. And then they took a second group and asked them to think about exercising for the same period of time and the same number of days per week over that month period. And obviously there was a control group that did nothing. But what was fascinating was that the group that were solely asked to visualize exercising, they actually increased their muscle, I think it was either mass or capability, by something like 35%, just by thinking about it. You know, it just shows the power that we have, and you know, and how important visualization can be. So any opportunity where you can drive attendance of participants by getting them to imagine that incredible moment of winning or taking part, and then the same of being there, you know, that, give people that sort of hope of that sense of community again and gathering. I think that would be a great opportunity. The next point is O for organized. I think Anna talked about this, you know, give it to them in a really easy way, give them the messaging, but in a format in which they can lap it up easily. Don't give them too much information, because they won't be able to understand it all, and too much information is overload and they'll tend to run a mile from that. So, you know, keeping all that messaging super simple. Next point is L for lively. So this is a piece where, you know, I think we've seen it with the power of video and the live format, but, you know, movement is far more impactful than static. You know, we still operate in a caveman way. If we see movement, we prioritize it over the static, because it could be life-threatening. And so the best way to get people's attention is by giving them lots of moving things that they perhaps need to focus on more, need to pay more attention to. So that can be really powerful from a marketing and a message dissemination perspective. And from a sensory perspective as well, like, you know, not just from watching, but doing, which is, of course, the power of live events. You know, there's more senses involved when you're physically moving. Things like, you know, the proprioception and kinesthesia and things. And the more senses, the more, you know, likely we are to forge a memory, and it's a more powerful memory. The last V stands for variety. We are all so different. You know, we all have incredibly different memories, incredibly different perceptions. You know, we come from different cultures. So I think this is a point, just not to create one experience, but, you know, consider the different types of people that are going to be attending your event, and try and give them multiple experiences, because what makes one person comfortable does not make the next person comfortable, or what attracts someone's attention is not always what it's going to attract the next person's attention. So we always try and create as much variety as possible to make sure we've got the most, you know, that we've maximized engagement by the most people. And then the final one, which is perhaps the most important, is that, you know, we don't make memories unless there's an emotion involved. And so, you know, it's super key to drive that up, you know, drive up that emotion as much as possible. And, you know, senses are one way of doing this. And obviously the more senses that you can use at a live event, the better. You know, smell, it's so powerful. Or even just the thought of smell. Actually, we did an online campaign with Red Bull for the F1, and just that a suggestion of the smell of burning rubber of the tires was used for a social campaign. And you know, so it doesn't always have to be the actual. And then, of course, one of those perhaps the most important senses in the emotion space, especially for live events, is touch. You know, that oxytocin that gets released, you know, around all this bonding that happens at a live event, and the amazing, you know, neurotransmitters all going crazy at the finish line. To you know, Anna and Peter's point earlier, like, you know, we want to hug, we want to, you know, have that physical connection. So what could the next, you know, what's the future of the cross the finish line physical connection? You know, because we are going to need something, and I think to be able to ask your audience what that could be, and crowdsource with them to, you know, fantastic suggestion from panel. That's exactly, you know, the way it should go. There was a brilliant campaign done by Smirnoff many years ago called "You Are the Night," and they crowdsourced what people wanted from their next night out, and then they gave it to them. And it was super successful, and I've quoted it a lot since, and I don't think there's enough done in the crowdsource space. So yeah, so that's it in a nutshell, but applying all those steps in Involve should appeal to your highly emotional elephant, and have enough rational in there for your rider, and hopefully leave you with a compelling event. We've certainly had some fantastic results from ours.
Thank you, Kristy. We were talking about the challenges in COVID time, obviously, of that most important one that you spoke about, the end emotion, and Peter came up with a great idea that tied into the crowdsource when we were having our planning call. Peter, your idea of you know, how do you replace that hug? Maybe you'd like to share the idea that you came up with.
Well, it's interesting, and the human brain is a meaning-making machine. That's what we do. We constantly make meaning. And as neuroscientists, we've always been interested in what is it exactly? How do we make meaning? And at the highest level, there's this wonderful term that neuroscientists have come up with, which is, it's also how we explain consciousness, by the way, which is, we say it's an emergent quality. Don't you like that? So that means that, you know, if somebody says, you know, Daddy, you know, how does democracy work? You can say, well, it's an emergent quality. You know, it's one of those one answer that answers everything that can't possibly be answered anyway. This is how we've come up with labeling consciousness. We say it's an emergent quality of having 10 billion neurons. Now, the problem with that, incidentally, just from a philosophical perspective, is that now the internet has just under 10 billion connections and neurons, which means that it's on the verge of having an emergent quality of consciousness. Isn't that an amazing thought? That the internet may actually be developing a sense of self and a sense of itself. So it might be us versus the internet, who knows? And all those War of the Worlds and all those fabulous sci-fi stuff that we all read for the last however many years might have something in it. Anyway, that's completely beside the point. The point is that we as human beings make meaning of everything. And so we're interested in, how does the brain make meaning? And there are two parts to it. The first is, even though we rail against constraints as human beings, and we rail against rules, an absolutely critical part of meaning is what we call an enabling constraint. So if you if you think of hitting a ball around a paddock, if you don't have any rules, it's not a game. It's just hitting a ball around a paddock. If you don't have a handicap in golf, it's not a game. If you don't have lines down the middle of a road, if cars are going in different directions, it's just chaos, in which case there's no fun. So an integral part of fun and meaning is to have rules. And rules are, from a brain's perspective, an enabling constraint. I play piano, and I paid my way through university in part by teaching people how to play piano in 3 weeks. They couldn't actually play piano, they could play one tune, but it was a great thing. You get a med student who could go home, and before they left home, they couldn't play the piano, and then they'd sit down and they'd be able to play 3 bars of something. That's all they could play. Anyway, point being, often I'd end up with these very successful people that wanted to play the piano, but they didn't want to actually follow anything disciplined like music. They just wanted to put chaos on the keys. And of course, it just sounds rubbish. And this is life. Life, the brain needs an enabling constraint. And the reason this is relevant is the question that we were discussing as a panel was, if people now have all these constraints of social distancing and they can't hug at the end of the line, and the oxytocin doesn't get released in the same way when you're online like this, what can we do about it? Part of the answer is to say, they're just part of the rules of the game. So you, as a winner, if you're in a team and you're competing, you need to follow these enabling constraints, which are the rules of the game. But the crowdsourcing part that Kristy said is absolutely right. How can they then work with those enabling constraints and still get the oxytocin? So, Lady Gaga's come up with that pure glass. It looks like a fish tank that sits on one of those bowls, fish bowls that sits on her face. It looks very glamorous, of course. Everything that she wears does. But there could be new designs of outfits that people could wear. There could be new ways of hugging that people come up with. This just becomes part of the fun of the exercise. And if it's presented not as a rule, but as part of the rules of winning, our winners are going to have had these 16 things, or these 4 things, if we wanted to play with the elephant, because 16 is a few too many. But the idea here is, it's only in our brains that it's a negative thing. Otherwise, it's no different from any other game. So we can use it to our advantage as part of the reset. And it will be a stretch for the first time only. The second time, they're just the rules. They're just the rules. When you're a child and you discover Scrabble, and you discover Scrabble, you discover any game, whether it's a board game or any other game, and you discover there are rules, it's a great imposition. But the moment you know the rules, it's no longer an imposition, because our brains are designed to make meaning from 2 things: enabling constraints, the rules, and how you have fun within the rules. And so culturally, if you look at all the different cultures around the world, we all have quite different ways of having fun within the rules. If you go to Amsterdam, it's quite different from Munich. It's quite different. We were talking the other day that when we first started working in Malaysia, the way you express and have fun and the way you express emotion is through karaoke. So if you want to say something, you sing generic words, but you look at the person that the words are meant for. And this way you can communicate amazing things. In Australia, we're nothing like that. In Australia, if you want to say something, we're pretty well known the world over for just saying it. We're not the most subtle in the world. Whereas, the English are far more nuanced and subtle in the way they're able to give very sophisticated approval or disapproval just by interacting, and the way they enjoy themselves is very different, as you would know, Kristy. So the point here is, you would think it's going to be the end of everything. If we put it as part of the fun of winning and we embed it as part of the rules, then people will use their creativity to win the game following those enabling constraints. And enabling constraints it's a little bit like a hydraulic system. And you get a whole lot of power and pressure and enthusiasm if you can take the water and you can put it into a narrower spout. That's exactly what we're doing with this. We're increasing the passion, increasing the enthusiasm, increasing the competitiveness, if we can just be really clear and follow the Involve and the East method to be able to take what could be quite complicated rules, simplify it, appeal to the elephant, and the rider will come up with all sorts of really innovative and interesting ways of being able to satisfy the need to connect and the need to have fun, but within those constraints. And we do this exactly as Kristy said, through crowdsourcing. You do this by asking people, give them the guardrails, don't give them the answer. Tell them about what success looks like. Don't tell them about how you're going to, make them comply, make it fun. And then celebrate people who do it well. What's amazing, if you open up the information to everybody within the group, you'll educate tens of thousands of people about how they can win within that enabling constraint. Then you're doing two things. One thing, you're educating the community about social distancing and being able to work in a COVID world. So you're educating the community, but you're also injecting a little bit of fun back into the community. This is what innovation is all about. Right through history, the human spirit has adapted to a different and changing world. Those who don't adapt die. Those who do adapt go on and live a better and greater and most amazing life.
Wonderful. And the finish line, one solution you came up with, which as I loved, is that these hugging teams filled in literally covered in sponsor gear, in plastic, completely COVID safe. You're not going to get hugged by your family member, but when you get to the finish line, if you like one, if you've followed the rules, you can go over in that corner and be hugged by someone who's going to give you a COVID safe hug. Not exactly as it is these days, but a new perspective and that opportunity to add those. I love that. Give the guardrails, not the answer. That's really fantastic, because and I've seen it out there. Everyone's being prescriptive. Events are saying, if you sign up, you do this, you do this, you do this, as opposed to, these are what we need to do. How might you be able to do that? I'd love to, I'm just going to throw around and give a quick final summary, but in between that, I'd love if people wouldn't mind in the chat to do two things for us. One is to let us know what they see as the biggest opportunity in the next 18 months, and two, what their biggest takeaway is. We've got about 5 minutes to wrap up, and we're always conscious of trying to finish on time, but love to hear your thoughts in terms of what you think the biggest opportunity is, and maybe this has triggered something, and what the key takeaway for you has been out of this, just in the chat or the Q&A. And then, sorry, Peter, I cut you off there. I'd love you to finish what you were going to say and just give one final takeaway for people to, as a bit of a wrap up of everything we've been discussing.
So this is a bit like the difference between a control fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Don't tell people what they can't do. People are well and truly sick the world over of hearing about what they can't do. What we want to tell people is what they can do. Our winners will have the following 6 things. Our winners have done this. And then when you do it, you showcase the winners and you say, that is amazing. We love your creativity. Isn't this terrific? And you might have some competitions before the major event so that you give people a bit of an idea that they can be creative about it. But the human condition is far more creative. We always think that we're going to solve these things through control. We solve these things through adaptation and innovation. So it's just a way of saying less of the rules, more about the winners. The winners are going to do these things. The winners are going to have these things. This is what success looks like. And we know that actually most of the people who are attracted to participation sports like this are more about success. They're more solution focused, so they'll respond more to it as well. It's just that simple framing. Frame it in terms of what it takes to succeed, rather than come here and we're going to give you a good thrashing and it's going to be a thoroughly terrible event. Trust us. Which is what we implicitly say, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you,
in this
Peter.
terrible world, in this terrible post-COVID world, come along and have a terrible fun run. Of course, nobody turns up.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. Great insight. Kristy, why don't we give you a wrap, and then we'll come back to Anna.
Well, I have to agree with Peter. I think, I think that's where so many of us who've been in this industry for years have tended, if we've ever gone wrong and had a negative experience, it's because we've disseminated messaging in the wrong way, and there's been a little bit of a backlash. It's no different now, and in fact, people are much more sensitive right now. And so I think you have to be very careful of what you say and how you say it. And exactly that, people are looking for a ray of hope right now. Give it to them. And they, in the main, should respond positively. You're never going to please everybody. I think we were talking about this yesterday, and Peter was saying, unfortunately, you're always going to get people that don't react the way that you want to when you're, no matter how much work you put into it. But if you can give the majority a very compelling reason to be there, or, that ray of hope, then right now, I think, a lot of them would do anything to be a part of that because of the position they're in, and they're craving this need to thrive, this need to be part of a community again, this need to get back out there and connect with people in a safe way. Just gear that messaging to be very reward focused and positive.
Robert, thank you. And Anna?
Absolutely agree with that. And I think just the last takeaway is just not to assume that people's riders will be making the decisions. Don't communicate to the rider. Respect the rider, but and don't get frustrated when people's elephants show up and if they're making decisions. Just lay the peanuts better, and be very considerate about where you're laying them, because they'll have intended and unintended consequences. So think that through, and just create amazing events that help people connect through a tricky time.
I love the lay the peanuts, and that whole point that you made about when you get to the finish line, you're tired, you're going to revert to type. There's obviously plenty of stress going around when you're at the start line even, which is bringing that elephant to the fore as well. So don't forget the elephant, I think, is probably a closing statement. But just really wanted to say thank you so much. Thank you for those of you that joined us. Thank you, Peter Burow, Anna Waters, and Kristy Castleton. Thank you so much for making the time and for all the great insights. Have a great night, day, evening, wherever you are.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Chris.
Fantastic.